recording and stop my share. I'm going to introduce Kyle and Ned. So Kyle is an extension educator at the University of Georgia and serves as a field service coordinator for the AgrAbility project. As a mechanical engineer, he has expertise in agricultural adaptive designs and fabrication. Kyle also is part of the Assistive Technology Innovation Lab at UGA, where he fabricates devices for individuals with disabilities across the lifespan. He trains community members and professionals on assistive technology solutions. Ned Stoller is a certified assistive technology professional and agricultural engineer for the Michigan AgrAbility and National AgrAbility projects. In addition, he is an assistive technology consultant for Michigan Rehabilitation Services, Fulfilling Life Ministries, and is the developer of disabilityworkconsulting.com, an online assistive technology resource for trade workers. So I'm going to turn it over to Kyle and Ned.
Thanks, Tess. So Ned and I originally began talking about doing this presentation a couple of years ago when I started working with a farmer here in Georgia who had a unique need that we had not seen before. And then we were going to do it at an earlier NTW, and then we finally were able to do it in NTW this year in 2022. And now we're excited to be able to do it as an encore webinar to the 2022 NTW. We're going to look at it several different ways today. There's a wide range of vision issues that our farmers experience, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them in the short time that we have, but we're going to look at two of the population groups that we serve most frequently with AgrAbility. And the first one is older farmers. As people begin to age, and the average age of our farmers is around 60 years old in the United States. And so we're going to look at that group. And then we're also going to look at military veterans who we're seeing come to our AgrAbility projects across the nation for services as they transition out of the military and find a really fitting and fulfilling career in agriculture. I always get excited when I see agriculture as number one. We have, for here in Georgia, agriculture is our number one industry. And so I got excited when I saw that we were the number one we were number one for something. And then I realized, oh, it's probably not a good thing. We're actually number one for the number of days away from work because of an eye injury of any sector. And 80% of the of eye injuries are a result of foreign bodies in the eye. And then farm workers also experience high rates of itchy and blurred vision and results from effects of UV rays from being out in the field for so long. So the good thing is about these stats is that we can reduce a lot of these statistics just by doing three prevention steps. First is wearing the safety glasses. And then if you're out in the sun, having safety glasses with UV protection or just sunglasses on can help to reduce a lot of the effects, but safety glasses is the most important. You can get the safety glasses with the UV protection, and that is the best of both worlds. Also, I know everybody has to do a lot of on-farm repairs, and make sure you're wearing those welding helmets and goggles. It is not fun when some of that slag hits you in the eye or goes behind your welding helmet and gets into the eye. So the first group we're going to look at a couple of the common vision impairments that our older farmers face. The first one is age-related macular degeneration, and it's a leading cause of vision loss for adults. It happens when there's damage to the macula, which is part of the retina in the eye that controls your sharp and straight ahead vision. It causes a blur to your central vision and makes it harder to see faces, drive, read things, or do things close up. As you can see in this picture on the right, this is from one of our tractor driving workshops. If you have age-related macular degeneration, this is what you're going to experience when looking at something. And so you can see it's a major problem for seeing a large tractor that's right in front of you. The next one's glaucoma. Diseases that cause vision loss and blindness by damaging the optic nerve fall into this glaucoma category. It's the most common type of glaucoma in the US is open angle glaucoma, which causes the loss of your peripheral vision, blind spots, and blindness. And so as you can see on the right, this is a lot of the peripheral vision that is lost. And however, early treatment can stop the damage and protect your vision from glaucoma. Now, this is the same picture that I had showed you in the previous slide. On the right, you can see that just that large John Deere tractor is in the field of vision. Well, as I flip back, what you don't see is the other Case IH tractor back there that's extremely large and extremely big and could be a huge injury waiting to happen. Another thing, you could be the one in the tractor and you don't see your grandchild standing there to the side of the tractor in these blind spots. And so it could be serious injury or death occurring because of these types of diseases. And this is something that we need to watch out for and know how to make assistive technology recommendations to be able to help with these impairments. The next one is cataracts, which is a cloudy area in the lens of your eye, and it causes colors to look faded. You're not gonna be able to see well at night. Lights may seem too bright or a halo around the lights, and then you can see double. Your glasses prescription is going to change quite often if you have cataracts, but surgery can get rid of them. And so on the picture on the right, you see the whole field of vision is blurry. The next one is the diabetic retinopathy. And this is a condition in which you have vision loss and blindness for people with diabetes. And what happens is blood vessels in the retina start to bleed into your vitreous, and it may cause you to see dark floating spots or streaks. Without the treatment, the bleeding can happen again, get worse, or cause scarring. And so you can see with these dark floating spots on the picture that certain things could be blocked out from you, and you may not notice if a cow is coming towards you, or if you're trying to do something in the shop, it may be impossible to read the measurement on a wrench. And so that was the first group of older and aging farmers. The second group we're going to focus on is military veterans. And the VA's Office of Blind and Rehabilitation Services estimates that there are approximately 130,000 veterans in the United States who are legally blind, and more than a million who have low vision that causes a loss of ability to perform necessary daily activities. With the veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, they have a lot of vision problems related to blast-related injuries. And so this could be blurred vision, double vision, a sensitivity to light, and difficulty reading. The VA estimates that as many as 64% of service members with a TBI also have a vision problem. With these, with the military veterans, common impairments you're going to see are those blurred vision, double vision, the loss of sight, peripheral vision, light perception, and then loss of eyelids, eyelashes, and eyebrows. Non-visual symptoms that can occur because of these visual impairments for the veterans are headaches, dizziness, difficulty navigating through crowded spaces, and disorientation. And we're going to see some firsthand examples of this later on in the presentation. We're now going to move into a section of the session where we look at some different farmer cases that we've had in Michigan and Georgia, and then we'll look at different solutions later on that are in the AgrAbility toolbox on the National AgrAbility Project's website. And we'll turn it over to Ned for him to go over his client cases in Michigan.
Thank you for that good background, Kyle. I'm going to move into talking about one of my clients, Greg Gieske from Michigan. And he started out as a beef farmer, raising cash crops and a cow-calf operation. And he worked at a factory also, and he developed loss of vision, and he didn't want to just be sitting in his house wondering what to do next. So he started working with rabbits, had a whole shed full of rabbits that he could manage by feel, moved into a vegetable market farm and poultry, both meat and egg production. And his vision is such that he can just barely see shadows of large objects. He is able to see pretty well in the wintertime when there's snow because it gives good contrast with the trees and things around him. But the challenge is on a snowy day, it muffles the sound and he's not able to navigate by sound as well. Several of my farmers have mentioned that. You don't have to deal with that in Georgia as much as we do in Michigan. I'm ready for the next slide. When Greg starts his vegetables in February, it's snowy outside, but he warms up a greenhouse and he uses a watering can to mix his fertilizer. He can control pretty well the amount of water going on to each flat of vegetables, and he can meter in the fertilizer pretty well that way. It's easier than watering with a hose and trying to guess if he's getting too much or little water on his flats of vegetables. Next slide. Greg's wife works with him when he's getting ready to plant in the spring, stretching the twine strings between two sticks to make his rows straight and evenly spaced. Even at that, there are challenges that he faces with that. The Pulmi-Pur sprayer here that is shown has really been helpful to Greg. He actually didn't reach out because of his low vision concerns, but because his knees were giving out. He was doing so much of his work on his knees, crawling along in the vegetable field and working with his animals. And so this sprayer, it has a small canister of pure Roundup up by his hand, and it sprays a very, very fine mist under the dome. And so it only contacts the weeds directly under the sprayer. We put a guide wire around the edges of it to give him 3 inches of safety space so that he doesn't accidentally go over top. Here he's spraying the strawberry plants, and the wire will bump his plants before the sprayer gets too close so that he doesn't kill the plants that he's raising. The sprayer is available through the Owesco catalog. It's a fruit and vegetable growers catalog, and it's about $160. Operates on a D-cell battery, and it has been very helpful for Greg in his operation. When I first met Greg, his tomatoes were growing and spreading out flat across the ground. He was not aware of the system of using trellis to tie the tomatoes up. All around us in Michigan, there are market farms raising tomatoes in production fields using wooden stakes and twine string to hold the tomatoes up in a large scale operation. And so I took one of my daughters along that works at such a farm, and she taught Greg how to wrap twine around the tomato plants. In the production fields, they go along and zigzag the twine between the wooden stakes and the tomatoes so that the twine ends up making sort of a football shape and cradles every single tomato plant. And you do it about every 12 inches. As the tomato grows, you add another layer of twine so that it continues keeping the tomatoes in an upright position. This was a challenge for Greg to zigzag the twine so much, but it did make a really big difference for him to keep the plants up off the ground. He was able to control the weeds in the rows. He didn't have to worry about stepping on the fruit, and is able to feel the tomatoes when he's ready to pick them. Next slide. What Greg figured out, instead of zigzagging the twine so much, he just took it from one wooden stake to the next, double wrapped it around the stake, and then he would go back later with zip ties and connect the two twines together on either side of the tomato plants, and that had the same effect as zigzagging it by cradling the plants pretty securely between the two twine strings. So that was his accommodation for his low vision. He could do zip ties much easier. Next slide. So here's a picture of his tomatoes as they grow up. He probably has 3 layers of twine on by this stage, and is going to put 2 more on, probably 5 layers of twine, until the tomatoes are determined to reach their maximum height. We'll move on to the laying hen operation. He's able to fill the feeders by feel using a 5-gallon pail and a scoop. You can fill the feeders clear to the top. They're gravity fed, kind of a standard feeder flock. But then Greg is a good manager. He knows how to farm, and he pays attention to his flock, and he'll go and catch his hens, and you can feel the pin bones at the back of the hen and be able to guess pretty accurately if she's a productive hen laying eggs or not. And I asked him, how in the world do you catch chickens? Because it could be pretty challenging for people with their full vision. Oh, he says, he pointed to the sleeves of his jacket. He said, the frayed sleeves of my jacket, the chickens are curious about them. So before I feed them in the morning, I'll go and take a chicken crate in with me and get down on my hands and knees, or down on my knees, and the chickens will come up and peck at the strings on my sleeves, and I can catch them and feel those pin bones. And then if there's a chicken I'm suspicious about not laying, she goes in the crate. And he's not raising rabbits anymore, so he uses his old rabbit cages and puts the chickens in individual pens and observes them for a few days. And if he's not getting 2 eggs every 3 days, then that chicken's no longer productive or profitable, and he will sell her at the market as a stew hen. So that's how he's accommodated and is able to catch his chickens and work with them. He sells his eggs at a farmer's market. Next slide. He also raises meat birds. He does not process the stew hens, but the meat birds, the rocks, put on a lot of weight fast. In 60 days. He can have a pen full of fat meat birds. He likes to get a blend of the hens and cockerels because the cockerels will gain weight faster. He can process them first and sell them. And then after another week or two, the hens are up to weight. And once again, he catches them in the same way. And he has all of the processing equipment, killing cones, and a scalding tank. And then he uses a plucker. These tabletop pluckers or a drum style plucker, if anyone's interested in the poultry business, it can be a profitable business. But I would say if you're going to mechanize it anyway, you just about have to get a plucker if you're doing more than 20 chickens. You'll spend 3 times more time plucking your chickens than the whole rest of the processing process combined. So Greg is able to clean his chickens, pluck them, and then his wife does the final checking for pin feathers and shrink wraps them before the customers come and pick up the chickens. And so in these ways, Greg has figured out he's not a beef cattle farmer anymore. But when we talk about assistive technology, it's really it's not just equipment, but it might be methods that a farmer would use to enable them to keep working. And so Greg just changed the type of agriculture that he was doing, since he's not able to run the big tractors and do field crops and work with the cattle any longer. And so he's able to continue on being a successful farmer in this way.
This next farmer we're going to look at is the reason that we did this presentation to begin with. When I started working with him, I called Ned and we bounced some ideas off of one another. And then we were like, let's do a presentation on it. Because I'm sure a lot of other people are working with the military veterans who are transitioning into agriculture, and they may run across someone who has some of the same vision issues as this farmer. He is a Georgia cattle farmer, and he has post-traumatic vision syndrome from his time in the military. And with the PTVS, he experiences movement of stationary objects, problems sustaining his attention, headaches, migraines, and balancing issues. And so that goes into a lot of the non-visual stuff that these military veterans experience from their vision issues. And one thing that we've done in Georgia is we've gone to meetings with him since he does have that problem sustaining his attention. And we've taken notes, been there for all of his vocational rehab meetings to be able to make sure that he's gaining and retaining all of that information. And then has stuff to be able to look back on so he can go back and review the meeting himself at a later time for his memory. He also has problems walking in straight lines. And then that translates over into moving vehicles. If he does not have a point of reference, he's not able to maintain that, the direction he's going. And so with that TBI and the resulting PTVS, the paths in the field and rows in the field really became his primary issue while he was out there on the farm. He noticed when he was planting his corn that he was going to feed his cattle that the rows were extremely crooked, and he could not go back to spray and to fertilize and then to even harvest because he could not follow the same rows. Even in addition to just going through his pasture, he would have a lot of overspray and underspray, and then ultimately the resulting fuel waste, which we know can add up to a large amount of can cut into a large amount of someone's profit these days. And so what we looked at was a GPS for his tractor, and we were able to work with the Semper Fi fund to fund a GPS unit that he's able to follow along. It gives him a point of reference and an arrow to follow on the screen. And he's able to plant in straight lines now, harvest in straight lines. We've mapped out all of his pastures, and so he's able to spray all the pastures as well. And so he is being able to conserve a lot more of his inputs. The second largest issue for him on the farm was connecting to implements on his tractor, and he could get within 2 to 3 feet of an implement when he was trying to back up to it. And so since we knew he needed some type of point of reference, we thought about using high visibility nylon rope to act as guidelines for him backing up. And so he would hook 2 ends on the implement and then would walk the ropes out and then stake them into the ground about 20 feet away from it. So this would give him a way to back up using his tractors with these navigational lines. And it worked well. He could get within 2 to 3 inches. So we had a huge improvement for being able to hook up the implements. Well, he called one day and he goes, I just got a new truck and it has a backup camera on it, and the backup camera works great for letting me be able to connect to my trailer. And we're like, oh, we didn't know the backup cameras worked well for you. So we ended up working with a company who makes and manufactures backup cameras, and we're able to get some agriculture cams for his tractor, and we mounted them. One of them that has grid lines is mounted right on the back of his tractor, just above the 3-point hitch, and this displays grid lines that he can use to then back up to the implements, and he's able to get there and align them perfectly to be able to connect. We also put cameras on the top rear of his tractor so it looks over the whole implement, and then a camera on the front of his tractor so he can look at stuff in his bucket when he's scooping or picking up material with his grapple bucket. You can see on the right hand picture, you can see the camera screen in the cab of his tractor. It's mounted on a swivel, so that way if he needs to see down into the front right tire, he can swing it out of the way. But he's able to just quickly glance down, look there, and be able to see all of his surroundings. And when backing up, after we installed these, we got a call from him, and I was like, oh no, the camera's messed up. I'm going to go back out there. Well, he called and he said, this is the first time I've been in the tractor and have not been dizzy and feeling like I'm going to throw up. And I was like, okay, why do you think that is? And he said the reason is because of these backup cameras. When he's traveling through the field, instead of having to turn around and look at his implement to make sure that everything's working correctly, he's simply able to just look down at the camera screen and see his whole implement behind him. And so that way he's not having to turn back and forth, which was creating a lot of his dizziness. The next client is Mr. Bob Berry. He is a Georgia poultry breeder, and he worked as a civil engineer for his whole career until he had to retire due to glaucoma. He had always loved chickens, and so he decided to start a small chicken hatchery with hatching equipment from a pawn shop. And he came to AgrAbility here in Georgia for assistance to expand his poultry operation to make it more of a full-time income for him after his forced retirement. His case is not heavy assistive technology, but it does, like Ned said, show the worksite modifications or how transitioning your business model can help to address some of the needs you may be facing. The main thing with his poultry operation is he was limited in growth due to his inability to drive and deliver chicks. The solution was for him to be able to ship his chicks directly to the consumer. And in order to do so, you must be certified by the National Poultry Improvement Program, NPIP. And so we worked with Mr. Berry to be able to get his necessary paperwork needed for the NPIP certification. We also referred him to Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and they have been an amazing partner for us in helping to get farmers the necessary adaptations they need in order to continue their meaningful employment. And so we assisted with writing that business plan, which was submitted to GVRA, and they funded a computer, feed, medical supplies, the incubators, a brooder, and a poultry house. In the picture right there, that was one of the brooder poultry houses that they helped to fund the materials for. And this is his website where people can go online and order chicks, and he will deliver them via mail to you. And he has amazing varieties of chickens that you can order, and he does a very successful business now. It's Bob Biddy's.
Okay, James is another market farmer in Michigan. He has sales place. Generally, he's selling bedding plants that farmers can use to, or the general public will plant in their garden. His challenges were primarily in the market. Next slide. To be able to remember his customers and the orders that were made, he basically has to write notes on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, very high contrast and good light. So he uses a whole wall for his notebook. Being able to see his credit card machine and using his cash register is definitely the biggest challenge. We were able to help get him an Eschenbach digital portable magnifier. He also uses a Ruby handheld magnifier that he can go through his greenhouse and look at the small print on the tags to know what plants are what in his greenhouse. And the Michigan Bureau of Services for the Blind also was involved helping him. The next slide. He was able to get a much more costly desktop magnifier that he could use to look at the flats when he was planting the seeds, because starting plants was his most profitable part of his business. And so this enabled him to continue doing that. And then the talking scales, he would buy 20 pounds of seed at once and then break it down into small packets, weigh it out by ounces and repackage and sell it. And so if you're not familiar with Maxi Aids, it's a very good website with lots of assistive technology for people with low vision. They have little sensors that can go on the side of a cup so that you don't overfill your coffee cup or a pail of water and things like that. Brian operates a U-Pick raspberry farm, and here in this picture, see him navigating in the snow. He uses a white cane, and he was very resistant to getting the white cane because he didn't want sympathy. But then when he finally gave into that, he realized how much it was a communication tool, not something to make people feel sorry for him, but to make people aware that he couldn't see them, so that he wasn't just walking up and bumping into people or things and causing people to be cross. But if they saw his white cane, then they would know. And so since then, he's worn many of them out because he does a lot of walking. He counts his steps and navigates by knowing how many steps it is from his front porch across his yard, across the road. Once he gets across the road where his main farm is, he has a rope tied from the mailbox up to his barn, and he uses up to his sales shed. Next slide. And then in his sales shed, he has wind chimes on the outside that helps him if he's out and about in the raspberry patches. And then he also uses the different radio stations so that he has different rooms in his shed with a different radio playing different stations. so that he is able to go from one part of his shed to another by listening to the radio stations. I lost the screen share. I don't know if it's just my computer or.
Actually, I think we lost Kyle.
Oh, okay. Can
Yeah.
I share my screen?
Yeah, you should try that.
Okay. I'm gonna try again here.
Okay.
I don't know why it's saying my screen share is paused, Tess.
Okay, I wonder if, no, I gave you permission. Let me remove it and put it back on again.
Okay,
Okay, try again.
all right. There we go.
Okay,
This is assistive technology, I suppose, that we provided. There is a pesticide applicator certification manual, and every 2 years, Brian passes the test. He is not the one applying the herbicides and the pesticides on his farm, but he's the one with the knowledge to know how much of what chemical when. And so he's not able to study the manual by reading it. And so Michigan AgrAbility and a series of volunteers read the manual and recorded it. And so Brian can listen to it audibly as he prepares for his certification training. So if anyone else is interested in this manual, even people who maybe are not good at reading, they could read a chemical bottle, but they're not going to be able to read a whole book like this to study. We'd be happy to share the audio files of this with anyone else that needs it. Now I'm going to go through the toolbox. If you go to the AgrAbility website, agrability.org, and click on the toolbox, there's quite a few solutions for people with low vision. And if you want to group them all together, go to the search menu and type in the word visual, and it will bring up the majority of the items that will help with visual impairments. So this is a spring scale that the glass has been removed from the front so that you can feel the needle going around and know approximately how much weight is being weighed on the scale. A syringe for working with cattle that every time you squeeze it, it administers a pre-registered dose. So if you need to give every animal 1.5 cc's of a vaccine, someone could set the syringe to that, and a person with low vision would be able to give the shots without needing to read the tiny gratings on the syringe. I was going to mention with cattle, I know Kyle talked about it, the danger of being out maybe in an open pasture and not able to see the livestock coming at you. Having good cattle handling equipment with holding pens, lanes, and alleys, and chutes and headlocks is really a primary concern for safety for farmers that have low vision. And I don't have a slide of that in the slideshow. I wish I would have. I thought of it after the fact, but I just wanted to make that point. Being organized, having your tools where you know where they're at. This is so critical. You know, with good vision, I spent a lot of time looking for tools that I didn't put away or my sons didn't put away. I shouldn't blame them because I do it too. But you can spend a lot of time hunting for tools. And so having a place for everything, tracing an outline. If you have a tool backboard and you can take a Sharpie marker and trace each tool so that when you take it off and you come back to put it back on the pegboard, you know exactly where it goes. A place for everything and everything in its place can really make a person with low vision much more productive on the farm. Now, this is a challenge for everyone, but particularly someone with low vision. to have good depth perception when you're lining up a auger or a conveyor with the top of a bin, and hanging chains from the end of an auger so that you can visibly see them move as they hit the top of the bin can help you gauge the location of the auger above the bin lid. And this is another really good solution. I found this, it's a grain elevator in New Zealand actually. And once they have their augers positioned just right for going into their bin, they mark the spot of the auger wheels and they pour a cement pad with a divot that the wheels go and sit right in. And then they do the same thing out at the end. You can see here where my cursor is, the end of the auger is also at a set point. And so you just automatically know, back the auger up until both wheels are down in the divots, and the other end of the auger is going to be right where it needs to be above the bin lid, without pulling forward and backwards and climbing the bin to see if you're lined up correctly or not. A great labor saving device and essential for somebody with low vision. This is a fever sensing ear tag, so that if an animal has a high temperature, the light flashes on their ear tag. This is a row marking system. This farmer has a different number of rubber bands on the ends of his row markers for each different crop, and he knows that 4 rubber bands means lettuce and 3 rubber bands means carrots, etc. And then he has boards laid around the perimeter of the garden so he can feel with his foot when he approaches and comes there, and the stakes and the twine strings to help him make straight rows. He also does the same thing actually at each corner of the garden. He has a taller stake and he puts dabs of silicone caulk on the tops of the stakes so that he knows which corner of the garden he is at. And that helps him orient himself where he's at in the space. The jumbo rain gauge that magnifies the amount of rain to make it easier to read. Lighting is very important for someone with low vision if you already struggle to see. There's a plowshare from National AgrAbility on shops, and it has a large section on lighting, and we're working on the shops plowshare, but there's a plowshare on lighting and being able to see well. And that's very critical for someone with low vision. Audible tools, whether it's a measuring cup like this that tells you how full, if you're measuring chemicals and mixing the spray or whatever you're working with, maybe you have a commercial kitchen and you're making bread for the farmer's market. And then this is a smooth screen oven with puffy paint around the buttons so that a person can feel where the buttons are at, operate those controls. A click rule or a talking tape measure, either one is available at Maxi Aids. As you pull the ruler out, it clicks every inch. And then the talking tape measure, you pull it out and it speaks the length that you've extended the tape measure. Let's see. Okay, we've got just a few minutes here. So I wonder if anyone has questions or another slide that they want me to go back to that you would like to look at. Be happy to answer any questions.
So Ned, there is one question in the chat. It says, can these ideas lead to new ways for doing or designing equipment for others that do not have eye problems? I think many would be interested in an automatized sprayer that doesn't kill the useful plants.
You know, with assistive technology, what I often say is it's helpful for everyone. It's essential for someone with a disability. And so all of these ideas are such great labor saving and really healthy ways of doing our work if we don't for instance, if you don't have to climb the bin ladder to make sure that your auger is lined up perfectly, then wow, what a benefit that is. So certainly all of these devices are going to be helpful for multiple people, especially with varying degrees of disabilities and different types of disabilities.
Thanks.
Is that the
Matt.
question, or did I not hear it correctly?
No, I think you answered it correctly. Christina, if you have any other questions, please feel free to, or follow up on that. She said thank you. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask. That's fine too.
I'd like to tell a story if that's okay, Ted.
Ned, go right ahead. We've got plenty of time.
All right. I back here. Early presentation, way back. All right. So here's my friend Greg, and he sells products at the farmer's market. And he sets up a sign by his cash box that says, I can't see. Just tell me what you're buying. I trust you, and I know how much stuff costs, and I'll tell you the price. And so he was there at the farmer's market, and a lady came up to him, and she had a tomato. It was a nice tomato, and she asked him the price. He says, it's $2. And she said, $2 for one tomato? That's crazy. And he said, well, it's just what it costs. It's a lot of work to raise these vegetables. And then it got quiet. So he thought that she had walked away. And he says, oh, that dirty bag. She has no idea how much work it is to raise these tomatoes. Well, she was standing right in front of him, and he didn't know it. So she got pretty excited about that comment. And she says, how dare you say that? I'm on a fixed income and I can't. And she was going on and on about this. Well, he was committed by then. So he argued right back at her. He says, I'm blind. I planted this tomato in February. I've been taking care of it. I transplanted it 2 times, been raising it out in my field. I picked it. It's August. And just now I'm getting paid and you're complaining about $2 for a tomato. And she bought the tomato. And after a while, she came back to his table and apologized, and he apologized to her. They made peace with each other over the whole deal. But then there's a teenage girl that drives him to the market and helps put out, just works with him at the market. And after that, they made an agreement that if he was getting too worked up, this girl that works for him says, Greg, apricots are not in season. And that's his clue that he should calm down and be careful what he's saying. So I thought that was a entertaining story, but it's hard for us to imagine all the challenges, both of raising the crops and the marketing and what all goes into it. And I really appreciate the determination of people with low vision that are working in agriculture and finding a way to be productive and have a good quality of life as they do it.
Thanks, Ned. There is another question in the chat. Says, are there any other best practices for farms wanting to support folks with limited vision? I loved the idea of tools being really organized, headlamps for light, etc., and would love to hear any other ideas.
I can just throw out a few ideas on different types of assistive technology or worksite modifications. One thing with like a farm shop, it's really important for people with low vision. If you switch over to LED lights, it can really improve the lighting for a shop. Also, if you put some type of wall paneling on the inside of the shop that is a lighter color, can help to reflect some of that light. And so there won't be as many shadows, and will allow people to be able to see tools better or see what they're working on a lot better. There's a lot of different talking tools out there that you can find. There's talking tape measures, talking tire pressure gauges. There's also, if you're working like with a table saw or something, it can be hard to find exactly what that measurement is for. You need to cut a board or something. One thing I've seen people do is make certain length little gauges that they can put in between the saw blade and the fence on their table saw. And so that way it's quick, they know exactly what that length is, and they can quickly get it aligned without having to use the tape on their table saw.
I have another thought about the farm shops, and that is actually it's not just in the farm shop, but anywhere, is beware of clutter and trip hazards. So you can imagine the different kinds of farm shops that there are and how challenging it might be if there's just stuff laying all over on the floor. The cord reels to keep the electric cords and air hoses up off of the floor are going to be really helpful. Just having designated pathways that a person with low vision knows that it's going to be clear. If there's a step, they pretty much can learn where that's going to be at. But if it's normally a clear path and somebody leaves a garden hose coiled up right in the path where the person with low vision is walking, that's going to be it could be a serious safety hazard for somebody with low vision. So I just would highlight that as an important aspect here also.
Next comment in the chat says, great examples. Thanks, Kyle and Ned. Can you share some more ideas around handling larger livestock? Is it your experience that farmers with significant visual impairments tend to move towards smaller animals and crops?
First thing I would say is fence line feeders. Trying to keep the farmer out of the pasture area with the larger livestock. A fence line feeder goes right in the fence line and allows the farmer to be able to put the hay or feed into the feeder and not have to go in there and be next to the animals where the danger could be present. I would say that the farmer does not have to move towards smaller animals. Ned can talk to this a little bit further, but there is a farmer in Tennessee who came to the National Training Workshop this past year. His name is Jason Barber, and he has a vision impairment, and he has cattle and has a pretty amazing operation. And he's all the time trying to find out new ways to be able to work with them. But he actually gets out there and gets pretty up close with them. He keeps his cattle very calm and has bred those genetics to be able to have the calmer cattle to be able to feel safe while he's out there working with them.
I definitely recommend the good cattle handling equipment if somebody working with large livestock, like I mentioned earlier. And someone has good enough vision that they could do a utility vehicle, a side-by-side utility vehicle that has some doors on it for protection. I recommend that if somebody's going out into a pasture, checking on cattle, especially checking calves in the spring. The mother cows can be very protective of their calves, and I've had several of my clients with vision that I've recommended that for, just for their safety, instead of going out and walking the pastures. And so you don't have to go smaller livestock. The state of Michigan has a really great market for sheep and goats. So I do recommend, if that's something they're interested in, and possibly consider doing smaller livestock.
Ned was mentioning the UTV that can be a great tool for farmers. There is also an add-on for the UTV, that an attachment called the calf catcher. So when you are working with those larger livestock and the protected mothers, it mounts on the side of the UTV, and you drive through the field and you can capture the calf in there, and it creates a barrier, a fenced off area for you to be able to work with the calf and not have to worry about the mother getting in there with you, or causing, or, coming up and hitting you while you're working the calf.
That is all that's in the chat right now. Does anyone else have any other questions to add? Okay. I have put in the chat the link for our evaluation. I'm just gonna put up our final screen here. Oh my goodness, there we go. So I want to thank both Kyle and Ned for sharing today, and I want to thank all of the rest of you for joining us. Again, if you could follow that link to the evaluation in the chat box, we would appreciate any feedback. Our next session will be on September 1st, and it's working with capstone students to augment AgrAbility services. We will have the recording of this session archived on the AgrAbility website at a later date. That's agrability.org. And if you have any questions about this or any of the sessions in the series, you can contact Paul Jones at jonesp@purdue.edu. All right, let me just see, and just lots of thank yous in the chat box to you guys. So I will stay on just a couple more minutes in case people need to follow the chat. But otherwise, thank you for joining us.